Northumberland Public Library presents Continuing the Conversation.
So I want to thank all of you for coming today. Today we are talking about your vote and how important that is and why voting is so important. And the way the panel is going to work is I'm going to ask you some questions and you have the opportunity to answer those questions. And then if anybody in the audience would also like to ask questions, they can. But this is all about why voting in Northumberland County is so important, especially in a non-presidential election year. Why voting for our local constituents makes such a huge difference about how your voice is heard. So I have a couple of specific questions for Joe, because Joe sits on the electoral board, as does Austin. And so our first question is, and this is for all of you, why do you think it's so important to register to vote? Go ahead, Joe.
Well, if you don't register, you can't vote. Registration is a very simple process. You just need your name and address and social security number, and you register to vote. Your registration application is then processed. It goes through a number of things to make certain that you are a citizen and that you are who you say you are. But it's important to register to vote, because if you don't register, you cannot vote. And it's that simple. Which then goes on to the question of why is it so important to vote? And I guess we'll deal with that momentarily.
Yeah, seriously, if you don't register, you can't vote. If you don't vote, then my standard line is you have no recourse to complain. Because if you're not being a participant in this wonderful system that we have in the United States, which doesn't exist in a lot of countries, you're kind of abrogating your responsibilities as a citizen. If you're going to be a citizen and have your voice heard. And you may not win every time, but that's part of the system we've got set up here. But in any event, if you don't register, you can't vote. If you don't vote, you're not participating, and you have no reason to complain if the outcome isn't the way you want it to be. Part of being a citizen.
I believe that it is very important to register to vote, because everything that we are involved in with life is political. There is a government foundation responsible for your food, for your water, for your education, anything and everything. It is something is regulated by the government, and if you don't register to vote, you don't get a vote. And so, long story short, it's all political.
Mr. Brand?
Well, being a U.S. citizen, you have a right to vote, but you cannot exercise that right if you don't register to vote. And I agree with the rest of the panel. If you don't vote, you shouldn't voice too much of an opinion on things that you don't like, because if you do register to vote, your vote can and may make a difference. And I believe in a small community like Northumberland County, it is very important for every citizen to try to get out and vote if they can. Because it's such a small community, and we need good leadership, and voting helps get people in positions to make a difference.
So before we go any further, could we take a minute and have you introduce yourselves? And we can start with Mr. Brand at the end.
I'm James Brand, and a board member for District 1.
Denise Mazik, District 3 School Board Member, Northumberland County.
I'm Austin Schmidt. I'm the chairman of the County Electoral Board. My two Democratic colleagues decided that they were going to give me the honor, and greatly appreciated. And may I have another.
And I'm Joe Slater. I'm the secretary of the electoral board, and I'm one of the two who ganged up and elected Austin as chairman. Didn't give him a chance.
And I'm
And
your
a fine chairman he is.
Yes, he is. And I'm your moderator, Jane Blue, the library director here. And this program actually is part of continuing conversations, part of a grant that we received from the American Library Association. And Joe and I had a big discussion a couple of months ago about how we can inform the people of Northumberland County about why voting is so important and get more people to our local elections. And this is part of that, why this came to be. So Joe, tell us, who is running for election in this coming election in November?
This is a statewide general election, and it is also a local election. So on the state level, we're electing a governor, a lieutenant governor, and an attorney general, the three top elected offices in the state. We also have the Virginia General Assembly, which consists of the state Senate with 40 members and the House of Delegates with 100 members. The entire House of Delegates is up for election this time. There are no senators running, but all 100 members of the House of Delegates. We are in the 99th district, and our representative, our delegate, is Delegate Margaret Ransom of Westmoreland County. And she's up for election. There is a candidate running against her who is Reverend Blizzard from right here in Northumberland County. And then on the local level, we have our Board of Supervisors and our school board each has 5 seats, one from each of the 5 districts in the county. And in this election, Supervisors Board District 2 and District 3 are up for re-election, and School Board District 2 and District 3 are up for election. And so we have governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, House of Delegates, and then 2 members of the supervisors and 2 members of the school board.
Okay, thank you. So do I have to go to my polling place to vote? And I'll give this one to Mr. Schmidt. Or can I vote via absentee? And how often, when is that open and when can I go?
Okay, yes, you can vote, well, you can vote absentee by absentee ballot, and October 22nd is the last day that you can request such a ballot. And you can also go right to the registrar's office in Heathville and vote in person there early. And we've been doing that since the 17th of September.
Okay.
So,
Can I go every day, Monday through Friday?
Monday through, yes, yeah.
Okay.
The office is open Monday through Friday during normal business hours. And you can also drop off your absentee ballot. There's a drop box, well, it's not a box per se. It's a slot in the door in the back of the registrar's office. So it's very secure, and nobody's gonna run off with the whole office and, or mess with that. So there's a drop slot right there. It goes right into the registrar's office, and it's taking care of the process there.
And I can also vote the 2 Saturdays before the election, correct? So the last 2 Saturdays before the election, you're open as well?
Joe said yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And another question I have for you about absentee voting, we were just talking about it. Can I do that even though I'm not going to be absent? I mean, what if I'm locally here, but I work full-time and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to the polls?
Yes.
Can I vote
Yes.
absentee?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So,
We make it as easy as possible for folks to get their vote in.
and there's a new law that says that once I register to vote absentee, I don't ever have to do that again, correct?
When you apply for an absentee ballot, a mail-in absentee ballot, there is a place on the form where you check that says, I want to be permanently registered. And in that case, yes, you would, as long as you are registered. Now, if you move, change address or something like that, but yes, as long as you are in current registration, registered here in the county, you would receive one by mail.
So every time an election comes up, I'll receive an absentee.
We have a few of those already.
Okay, great. So why is voting in a local and state election so important? Mr. Brand?
It all falls back on, trying to have good representation. I think, people sometimes want to run for office. I think you may have strong candidates at times, you may have some maybe a little stronger than others. And the voting process helps put the right person in the right place. And it's done by the citizens. It gives the citizens the opportunity to vote the person in that they wish to represent them. And it all goes back to we the people. We the people choose this person. And the majority votes will get that person elected. Again, it's all about change too. If we had the same people that sit in the office all the time, I think we would not have change and things would not go well.
Okay, Denise?
In addition to all of that, why is it important to vote in a local election first? In a local election, you normally know the people. So there are people who you can get in touch with your issue that you already have some knowledge of, some credence, and especially in a rural area such as this, everybody knows everybody or is connected to somebody who knows somebody else. So we the people then becomes very important, and you have the opportunity to then put your finger right on the pulse of whatever the issues are and letting other officials know what you think. Same thing goes for a state election. Sometimes in a national election, you don't get as close. You know, they may come in for, a site visit. You can always communicate in some way on a national level. Local and state, I guess the end result of being able to reach someone who you know or have a connection with is very powerful. So I think that it's just as important that local decisions then move up to state decisions to have an impact on national decisions. So I think that it is very important to vote in local and state elections.
Okay, so this is a great opportunity with something that you said to segue into a question about advertising and seeing candidates, meeting them. One of the problems that we have in this local area is very rarely does a candidate come to this area that we get to actually sit down and ask them questions and talk to them. And most of the time what we see is online. It's advertising or on TV or something like that. And it would be great to have some face-to-face interactions with some of our candidates. Do you think that relying on ads versus relying on face-to-face, what's the difference in the two, and why is it so important that we have an opportunity to have some face-to-face conversations with those people who are running for a local election? Anybody want to take that one first?
Well, the perception of an ad or a flyer with information that a candidate wants to get it can be interpreted totally different by different people. Each individual has a personality. For me, I want to meet that person. I want to be able to talk to that person. I want to see how they interact with me. I want to see how they interact with other people. You may have someone tell you everything that you want to hear on an ad or a flyer, but they may not be the person for the job because they may not have good people skills. And I think personality and attitude toward citizens, toward certain projects that you may be working on, it carries a long ways. It helps build that foundation and it helps build relationships. And that's something that an ad or a flyer or something in writing cannot do.
Yeah, I totally agree. Everybody's got their own issues. Everybody's got their own personal issues, like the farmers down here want to know what the candidate's going to do for them, and the watermen down here, and the mechanics and the builders, and everybody down here it looks through a different prism at the world. And if you can buttonhole the candidate and put your view in their ear, and see how they answer. And at the national level, it's really hard to get anybody's attention at the national level, especially from folks down here. But the people who represent us right here in the county, on the Board of Supervisors, and at the state level, if you get the opportunity to put your issue in their ear, then they gotta think about it. And hopefully take some positive action, but it's an excellent opportunity to get your view across and let the candidates know what the people are thinking. Back to we the people, yes.
That
Seriously.
seems to be our catchphrase tonight.
I
We the
like
people.
that.
I like that too. So, one of the things that's gonna happen here in the next few months is redistricting. And there is some kind of concern about how that will affect Northumberland County. How will it affect our local areas and when will it happen? And is the current election that's coming up based on our current districts or our districts in the redistricting?
Well, let me talk about districting and redistricting in general terms, and then Mr. Supervisor, Mr. Brand, because the Board of Supervisors is going to have to wrestle with this. The whole idea of districting, whether it be on the federal level or on the state level or on the county level, is there's a lot of people. You got a lot of population. We have 12,000 people in this county. And so our representative government is that we elect somebody to represent us. And so what we had decided upon years and years and years ago was that we're going to draw districts. And so the state of Virginia has, 9 members of the House of Representatives. So we've got 9 districts. So you want to make those districts as even as possible in terms of population. If you have 9 million people and you got 9 congressional districts, you'll want to draw a line so you get about 1 million people in each congressional district. And the same thing here on the county. We have 5 electoral districts in the county, 5 supervisors, 5 members of the school board, and you want to keep that population as even as you can. Another thing that you like to try to do is make it kind of contiguous. It's best if you have a district that's like this instead of a district that sort of snakes along here. And so every 10 years we have a census, and when we run the census we find that people have moved from here to here. And so whereas you used to have a fairly even distribution of voters, all of a sudden you got a bunch of voters who moved over here and who left here, and so you have to redraw those lines. And that's what's going on right now. We are, in Virginia here, we have a commission that is wrestling with how to redraw the congressional district lines and the Senate lines for the state Senate and the House of Delegates lines. And then once they get done with that, our Board of Supervisors are going to have to wrestle with how to redraw the district boundaries. Now, we're kind of fortunate here in that our population shift has been fairly small, so there's probably not going to be a whole lot of moving of lines. And if you vote in the first district, you're probably going to continue to vote in the first district. But that's why we're going through redistricting. The census that goes on every 10 years shows where people move, and then you have to back up and say, all right, what does that do to our proportional representation? And the supervisors are going to have to start wrestling with that pretty soon. But your question was, in November, we're going to vote based on the districts that are in place right now.
And the board has had some discussion on the redistricting, but it's not at the point where we need to start looking at it to take action. So it's probably going to be a little longer. And like Joe said, you know, the way the district's going to be voting this time is going to be the way it's been done the last few years. And again, I agree with him, as people move around in the counties, the districts change. So if you don't pay attention and don't help realign the districts, then your voting kind of gets out of whack. But like I said, I know the board has had some discussions on the redistricting, but we haven't really done anything with it as yet.
Will that have to be completed before the election next November?
I would say so, yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
It probably is going to need to be completed before the end of this year because there is a possibility of having a primary election in June of next year, which would be based on the congressional districts. And what will happen is this, and the way this will affect individual voters, in the voter registration database, you are assigned to the district where you live. And the voter registration database is tied to the geographic information system, which is what is used to draw the lines, because the geographic information system that the counties and the state uses has population plugged into it. So if you now vote in, say, District 3 in Northumberland County, and something happens to move those lines and you're moved into District 2, you will get a new voter registration card mailed to you that says you now vote in District 2. And folks do need to watch for that, because there probably will be, if the line goes down the middle of the road, it may move over to that side of the road or that side. So there no doubt will be some changes in the district.
I know one of the examples you gave the other day was about being in the middle of a cornfield. And your house is in the middle of the cornfield, so which way do you go? So,
I mean, District 1 and 2, when it comes to Callio, the 360 is the line. I mean, coming through Callio, everything on the right side is District 2, everything on the right side is District 1, everything on the left is District 2. Like Altown, you would think would be in District 1, but it's District 2.
okay.
And
So
it's,
that's tough for both of you, for Denise and for you, because once those lines are drawn, they could be drawn differently. So that could be, how would that affect you as candidates?
I mean, we would have to, I mean, we would still represent, you know, who was in that district, but we would have to get in and know those people as well. And hopefully we've already met them, because we've been interacting meetings and out in the community all along. And that's, and to go back to what you had said earlier about voting locally, is that it is an advantage being on the Board of Supervisors and living in a small community, because we know most of the people in that community already.
Is it a requirement to live in the district?
Yes, you have to live in the district that you
represent?
yes.
Okay, that's good to know. So let's talk about voter fraud, because that seems to be a hot topic no matter where you are or how much news you see, and about integrity in voting. What are some measures that we can take to make sure that our elections have integrity? In the past 10 years, there have been 489 cases of people who have tried to do something funny with elections in the entire 50 states, which isn't bad if you think about it. And that's a statistic that Mr. Schlater shared with me. But there's still always that question about voter integrity and voter fraud. So what are some things that we can do to make sure that we are keeping our voting secure? And I'll just go down the line. I'll start with Mr. Brandt and we'll work our way down.
Well, I think the last few years with all of that going on, the arguments back and forth that the elections were rigged and all of that, I think technology, you know, the more you put technology in it, the better off you can be. But I'm also a believer that honest people are honest people, and those that are dishonest are going to be dishonest. So it's going to be a battle that we forever face. Like I said, technology is a wonderful thing, and I know they've thrown a lot of technology at the process of voting, the way we vote, the sealed envelopes, and the process as you go through the polls. But you know, if someone wants to do something wrong, they're going to find a way to do it. People are going to hack into computers, into systems. And you know, things, like I said, they're honest people, and they're going to be honest. Dishonest are going to remain dishonest, and they're going to try to find ways to flaw the system. It's just my point of view, and I'll stick with that.
As far as voter fraud is concerned, I think if we have the proper protocols in place, that's as much as what we can do on our end, making sure that, you know, what we say we need, you know, address, phone number, social security card number, driver's license number, some form of ID, and that they only vote once. You know, that's the other thing.
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances. So, you know, having the proper protocols in place and, you know, having people, you know, somewhat agree with people who are going to try to do something dishonest will find a way, but we just have to make it hard for them to go outside of the proper protocols.
Well, the folks in Northumberland County can sleep real well at night and not worry about voter fraud down here, because the way our machines and our system are set up is we don't have them on Wi-Fi. There's no outside signals that can get in our machines. They're very, very carefully maintained. They're locked up all the time in the registrar's office in a secure area. And the only people who touch them is the electoral board when we go in and make sure they're ready for the next election. And I have observed the process and participated in it now, and I'm absolutely impressed with the way the system works in Northumberland County. And Joe is our chief mechanic on that. He knows everything about those machines and how to make them work. And you know, the process is involved and lengthy, and we have checklists of everything we're supposed to do, and we record serial numbers off of the security bands that come off machines and go back on them to make sure that nobody's taking any chips out or anything like that. The machines are zeroed out for each election, and we keep the paper copies, and they're locked up once we get them. So if anybody has a question about the elections down here, we've got the proof immediately available as to what we did, how we did it, and there's signatures, and there's, you know, chain of custody involved on everything. And there's absolutely no messing around in this county. People can sleep well knowing that this county does it right and it's clean.
We've heard a lot, and it has grown and grown over the past few years about the question of election fraud. And it's a term that covers a lot of stuff. One concern is people who are not eligible to voting. That includes non-citizens who somehow get registered to vote, includes dead people voting, includes anybody who is not eligible to vote. There are, and I can only speak for Virginia because we operate in Virginia, and we have to abide by the Virginia election law. There are a lot of steps that have to do with registration and maintaining the list of registered voters that cleans up that kind of thing. When you register to vote, you check a box that says, yes, I am a citizen, but you don't have to show any proof. However, once you submit that form, then that sets some things in action, and you are checked against various citizenship databases with DMV, with the federal government, with Immigration and Customs, and there's one other that checks. And folks who are registered to vote and who die, the State Department of Bureau of Vital Statistics that issues death certificates, those are provided to the Department of Elections, and those folks are removed from the voter rolls. People who are convicted felons, who are convicted of a felony, the Secretary of the Commonwealth provides that list every month to the Department of Elections, and they are removed from the list. And beginning about 8-10 years ago, the General Assembly required that the Department of Elections provide an annual report of what has been done to clean up the voter rolls, to ensure that ineligible people are removed. And you can go to the Virginia State Department of Elections website and it's got a little search box up there, and you can search for list maintenance, and you can get those reports that go back several years, and it tells you how many dead people were removed from the rolls, how many non-citizens. Every year there's 600 or 700 folks who registered to vote who have turned out to be non-citizens, and they're bounced off the rolls, and every one of those is turned over to the state police for investigation. The folks who died during the year are removed, and there is also an extensive process of updating addresses. When you move, we all, I guess most of us, go down to the post office, fill out a change of address form. And every year, the post office sends all those change of address forms to the state, and then we bounce those against your current. And if you are not registered at your new address, you get a letter that says, respond within 30 days or you're going to be listed as an inactive voter, and even if you show up to vote. So there's list maintenance that, and every state does the same thing. They may call it a little different thing. There's been a lot of noise about extra ballots, and I don't know how other states account for their ballots, but we account for every ballot here in Virginia down to the one ballot. We had an incident in a polling place a couple of years ago where a gentleman came in, he got his ballot, he stopped in the middle of the polling place, said, I don't want to vote for any of these people. And he ripped it up and stuck the ballot in his pocket and headed out the door. We had to try to track that guy down because we need to figure out where that one ballot is gone. We finally had to give up on it, but ballots are accounted for one at a time. We order them from a printer, and the printer is inspected by state officials, and the ballots come to us sealed, and if they say, we sent you 8,000 ballots, we crack the boxes open and we count. And then we divide. We're going to send 1,000 ballots to Callio, we count them. I'll count them over here, and then I'll turn them over to Austin, and he'll count them, say, Al, got them, and we send them down there, and they're sealed. They only open them up as they need them, and at the end of the day, they have to account for, we were issued this many ballots, we put this many out to give to the voters, we had this many voted, we had this many that were spoiled, and we had to give the voter a second. We had some provisional ballots that we'll have to count later because the voter either didn't have ID or wasn't registered or something like that. Ballots are counted every one of them is accounted for, including the ballots that go out by mail, the mail and absentee ballots. The voting machines. Voting machines have to be certified first by independent laboratories. You can't just go out and start selling voting machines. The Federal Election Assistance Commission establishes the standards for all voting machines and voting systems. And so you have private laboratories that check the machines against the standards. And then the machines have to go through testing by some federal laboratories. The one that we have to deal with is down in Huntsville, Alabama. And then before you can sell machines in Virginia, you have to be certified by the state of Virginia. And our manufacturer needed to do a software update to our machines, and it took 2 years to get the update certified. So there's an extensive certification process. And in Virginia, we do not allow any voting machines to connect to the internet in any way. It has to be a sealed system, machine. The programming, the software that programs the machines for each election goes through a similar certification process. And our machines are certified by are run by a little thumb drive. We own, I think, 50 some odd of those. We send them back to the manufacturer. They go through an extensive certification process, and then they seal them in a box and send them to us. And they call us and say, it's coming to you by UPS, and the seal on the box is this number, and when it gets there, we have to make certain that thing hasn't been broken. And then we use those to program the machines. So there's double checks and double checks built in. But as Mr. Brand has said, there's always somebody. A good source is either the Brennan Center for Justice that does extensive research into voter fraud or election fraud, and then also the Federal Election Assistance Commission. And the statistic I like to use is that Brennan Center looked back over 10 years, a 10-year period recently, and if you take every election in every state, there was something like 3 billion votes cast. They then go to the attorneys general of all the states and say, how many people have you in fact prosecuted? How many cases of election fraud have you prosecuted? And that number turned out to be, as you said, 489 cases out of 3 billion ballots cast over the last several years. So there you have it. You hear a lot about it, but what you don't hear is the final outcome. I'll give one example and then shut up. About 6 years ago, there was a big blow up down in Florida. Florida is like most states where they issue driver's licenses to non-citizens, and it's a separate little driver's license that has some kind of code on it, non-citizen. Somebody ran the non-citizen driver's license list against the voter rolls and said, we've got 100,000 non-citizens voting here in Florida. Well, the Florida Secretary of State, who's responsible for voting, said, I don't believe that. So they took the list and broke it out by county, and what they found out was that DMV was not updating their records. You had, I forget what the final number was, but it was almost 100,000 people who had become naturalized citizens. DMV had never updated the record, or they had never gone to DMV and said, hey, look, I'm a naturalized citizen, I'm that. So you had several tens of thousands like that. You had a lot of cases where it was the same name and the same month and year of birth. Well, if you figure the most common name in this country is Maria Lopez, and there's almost 4 million of those, and there are only 365 days on which to be born and only 12 months in which to be born, you don't get a lot of dupes. But what you never heard was that at the end result, there were a couple of hundred people that they could never figure out. They couldn't contact them, weren't sure who they were, where they were located, but it all of a sudden went from 100,000 down to about 200. So, does it happen? Yes, it does happen. Is it of such a consequence that it's going to affect elections? It just really is not.
So it gives new meaning to paper trail.
You can't give up.
So you have to have a
cannot
paper
give
trail.
up. Oh, well, which is why in Virginia we have gone to paper ballots only. Some of you all may remember, up to about 3 years ago, when you go in to vote, there would be two machines. You got a ballot and you could mark it and put it in a scanner, or you could go over and vote on this machine. This machine was a direct reading machine, and it counted the ballots. And at the end of the day, we would have to go over here and get this machine that said, candidate A's got 200 and candidate B's got 300, and then we'd have to come over to the touchscreen machine, which did not give you any way to check. It just said, candidate A's got 10 and candidate B's got 20. And we had to take that on faith. Over here, you can pull those paper ballots out and sit there, one for you and one for you and one for you and one for you. And there was an election about 5 years ago where in Virginia Beach, Henrico, and one place in Spotsy County, some of their DRE machines were acting squirrely. They weren't, you were touching this candidate and it was voting for that candidate, and they had to call them out of action. And the state immediately after that outlawed them. Got to get rid of them. There were some counties that it cost them a lot of money because they had to replace all their machines. But now we are paper ballots only. Now, when you go into our polling places here, you will see the scanner where you get your ballot and go throw it in there, and that old scanner counts it. But there is another machine that is a touchscreen machine that is used for voters with disabilities. You can put on some headphones and the machine will read the ballot to you. You can blow up the screen so you can read it. But that prints a ballot. After the voter's made their choice, the printer prints it and the voter gets to look at it and say, yeah, that's the one I want, and then it goes back to the tabulator. So we're in Virginia in all paper ballots, so we've got that paper trail.
Which is a good thing. So on the election day, we encounter many different people. Some of the people we encounter can't come more than within 60 feet of the entrance. Who are those people and why are they allowed to be there? Austin, you want to take that?
There are political activists on all sides who are authorized to come, as you say, within 60 feet of the polling places, and they put the signs out there, they have the tents and things like that. And of course, what they're trying to do is influence the voters as they're coming into the polling place to vote the way they think they should vote. And that's perfectly legal, and that's okay, it's part of the system. They're the Never Say Die gang who want to make sure that they're working for their candidate right up to the last millisecond before the voter goes in to cast their votes. And bless their hearts, they're doing what they can for their candidate, and can't argue with that. It's all part of the system, and hopefully we don't get obnoxious ones down here. I'm sure there are, but you know, they're doing their part to contribute to the system, and as long as they don't get silly about it, okay, they can be there.
We also see other people at the polling place. Joe, maybe you could share with us who some of those people are.
Oh, well, yeah, as you see, you've got your poll workers or campaign workers, and it's 40 feet. They have to be 40 feet back from the front door. In fact, we have little red cones, little red traffic cones with a sign on top of them that says no electioneering beyond this point. One of the things we have to do the day before the election is go set all those things out and pull the tape and measure 40 feet. Those are your folks who are working for a party or for a specific candidate. Inside the polling place, when you come inside that 40-foot limit, the people you will see are what are called officers of election. They are folks who have volunteered and said, we would like to work in the polls to help people vote. We try to get them divided fairly evenly between the two political parties. But we also have a lot of folks who say, look, I'm independent. I really don't have any leanings one way or the other. And then we assign them. We try to assign folks fairly close to where they live because they have to be at the polling place at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you don't want them driving the length of the county. But you will see at each polling place, inside the polling place, officers of election. When you come in and they ask you for your ID or what's your name, those are two of our officers of election. One of them will hand you a ballot. There will always be somebody standing back over there next to the tabulator to, if you drop your ballot in there and the machine doesn't take it, tell you, no, pull it out, turn it around, do this with it, that kind of thing. And then we will always have in each precinct a precinct chief and assistant chief. The chief basically sits back because somebody comes up and they're not registered to vote. Well, instead of the person who's sitting here with the poll book getting into a discussion with them about yes I am, no you're not, goes over and lets the chief solve it. And then the chief says, let's do a provisional ballot, let's do this, let's do that. So you will see officers of election. We like to have 7 or 8 at each polling place so they can take a break. because the day starts at 5 in the morning and it doesn't end till 9, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And they do need to, take a break and circulate around.
Is that a volunteer position?
It's a volunteer position. They're very well paid. They earn all of $100 a day. And they have to go through training. We have training. The precinct chiefs have to be trained on new election laws before each election. And the officers of election have to be trained once a year. And depending on what's going on, we sometimes train our officers of election 2 or 3 times. But yeah, they come in for a training session, and we go through all the do's and don'ts and how to operate the poll book and what to do to open the polls and close the polls. But those are the people you'll see. As Austin says, you'll see the campaign workers outside asking for your vote, and you'll see the officers of election inside, which has to be all business.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the Board of Supervisors. How often do they meet? Where do they meet? And can anyone come to the meetings?
We meet the second Tuesday of each month, unless we have a special call meeting. All meetings are advertised. They're open to the public. We did have some meetings that, and we still have a way for people to come in by Zoom meeting, virtual meetings. Anyone can attend. But there are times when we have closed sessions that are not open to the public, and that is certain rules and regulations that we have to abide by to have a meeting of the closed session. And a lot of times that's to do with personnel issues, something like that. But majority of the meetings are open to the public, and we welcome the public. We'd love to see citizens come.
And you meet on the second Tuesday of every month?
Second Thursday.
Second Thursday, I'm
Yes.
sorry, at 5:30
Yes,
at the courthouse?
at the courthouse.
Okay. Denise, how about you all? When does the school board meet, and can anyone attend those meetings?
School board meets on the second Monday of each month, 6 o'clock. We do have closed session normally prior to 6 o'clock. And at this time, we are also operating with Zoom meetings for the public. And
Anybody can attend?
anybody can attend.
Okay. Good to know.
And we also have a time on the agenda for public comments, so that we hear from the public if there, is anybody who wants to say anything, give us any information, ask any questions.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was my next question, was how does each board conduct their business, and how can I let a supervisor or a school board member know about an issue?
I'll continue. As far as letting a school board member or the board itself know about any issue, they can contact the school board directly through the school board office. There are administrators there who will take the information. Our emails are public information on a website. So emails, local candidates as myself, put out, a telephone number for people to contact me directly, especially those in my district. But once, as an incumbent member, I represent everybody. When I sit there as a board member, I represent everybody, so it's not just, open to the only people that can call me are District 3 people. District 3 people, I'm your representative, but once I get on the board, I represent you all. So our information is public information. There's a website, email address, email, call us. And we do get letters. We get phone calls. We get 3 ways. Somebody told somebody else to let us know. The message gets to us, and then we try to address whatever it is, and we're open.
And it's pretty much the same way for the board of supervisors. Citizens can contact the county administrator. They can contact me directly. My information, the county administrator's information is all on the county website. Most definitely they can send emails, we get letters, just like anyone else. And I agree, when you're on the board, you represent everyone, not just people in your district. You You're just assigned to that one spot, but at that meeting and when you're talking, and conducting business, you're representing everyone. And we do get some phone calls, and we do our best, and I know the school board does the same, to get issues resolved.
So I'm gonna run for office.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
The other meeting place is usually the grocery stores. We hear a lot
I've heard that.
you know, TriStar, Food Line. We hear a lot of issues, and church.
And church.
So
That's great.
those are other places where we do have constant contact.
It's not a planned meeting, it just happens.
It happens.
So I decided that I'm gonna run for office. First of all, should I? And how do I go about getting the funding to do so? And we'll just work our way down the table, Mr. Brand.
I would encourage anyone, if they're interested in running for office, before you do so, is to talk with someone that's already in office. See what they've done to prepare themselves to be a good candidate. Most definitely, anytime you're interested in running for office, you can go to the voter registry office. They have packets there for any candidate. That position is open and available. It's a lot of paperwork to fill out, but it can be done. And as far as funding, you know, me personally, I funded most of my campaign. But there are people out there that will make contributions, in-kind service donations, and money. Some political parties do endorse candidates and do help with funding that way also. So, I mean, there is some funding available. But again, I would encourage anyone that if they want to run for office, please do so. We need people. We need people.
Something that's very important, especially in the local election, you have to have a certain number of signatures on a petition. And so, you know, securing those signatures and finding a way in order to get them. That's where face-to-face contact, you know, going into your district, asking, you know, telling them who you are, introducing yourself, asking for their support, asking for their signature just to get your name on the ballot. There was 125 signatures needed for the local school board race. And I did not go through any sort of web service, which is also available for some people. But it was, you know, house to house, you know, person to person. I want to be on the ballot. This is who I'm introducing myself, and this is who I am. Would you sign this petition in order for me to become a candidate on the ballot? So that's one major thing, in addition to the packet of, well, that's a part of the paperwork that you receive from the registrar. It's in there. The other thing that I would encourage is that you could definitely consider that you have to be a fundraiser. If you have opposition, then you have to be able to combat, you know, that other person. So there, you know, you yourself, if you're not that good at it, you need to find a campaign manager or treasurer or someone else who's willing to support you that's good at it. Because you do need funding for things. None of this is given to you. You have to buy the yard signs, then, you know, get the paperwork printed for a media campaign, for a postcard, for a door hanger. They cost. So getting somebody to design all of that so that you look good costs. So, you know, face-to-face contact, getting people to support you so that you just get your name on the ballot, and then going back to canvass to make sure that you ask for their vote and not assume that just because you got them to sign a petition that one day they'll remember that, you know, I want your vote. So going back and asking for it. And I guess those are the main two things.
Going back to a previous question, in getting that 125, those 125 signatures, and the reason to register to vote, you have to be a registered voter for that signature to count, to help get your candidate on that ballot. So that is another reason why you need to register to vote. That process starts there. And another thing I like to add to is going door to door. That right there helps build the relationships with the people. They're not going to the polls and they're looking at a name and they're like, who is this person? And it's very important.
Austin or Joe, did you have anything to add to that one?
I don't,
One of the things, Joe, that you and I talked about was absentee voters. And could you tell me what percentage of absentee voters we have in Northumberland County?
It'll vary a little bit from election to election. Back during the November 2020 presidential election, we had, somebody's going to have to do the math here to help me out. We had about 9,800 registered voters in Northumberland County, and the turnout was 72%. So 72% of 9,800 people voted. We put in the mail, we counted 972 mail-in ballots, absentee ballots. So if we had not quite 7,000 voters who voted and 972 of those are absentee, that's what, 1 out of every 6, 1 out of every 7 was an absentee by mail. In the primary election back in June, turnout was very light. We only had about 16% turnout. And I don't know if we mailed out even 150 or 200 absentee ballots then, so it varies from election to election.
Okay.
Not to split hairs here, but we all use the term absentee ballots. What you're doing right now, this early voting, what we call early voting, is in fact absentee voting, because you're not voting on election day. You're absent on election day, so you're voting today. But anyway, we put in the mail some number of absentee ballots every election, and it'll vary from election to election.
So are the electoral laws in most states the same? And if not, why are they different?
Well, of course, neither one of us have read all 50 state laws, but everything I've read and understand about election is that the processes are pretty much the same. You know, the details vary. Now, there are a couple of very big differences. There are 7 states that are, and I'll caveat this a little bit, that are 100% vote by mail. 7 states, 100% vote by mail. Now, they do have limited in-person voting. They will all have scattered around polling places where you can go vote in person. And there are 2 ways that works. There are some states that automatically mail a ballot to every registered voter. So sometime before the election, if you're registered, you'll get a ballot along with the instructions of how to return it. Some of those states mail an application to every registered voter, and then you got to fill it out and send it back, and they will send you the ballot. So the laws in those states, I assume, are somewhat different from ours, because they've got to deal with how to manage and track those ballots that are sent out for mail. Some states will have, there's about 10 or a dozen states that have by-mail voting in certain localities. You've got some of your western states that have great big counties, but they're very sparsely populated, and it's just easier for everybody to just mail the ballot to the people in that county. So there are some state laws that deal with that. Other state laws will vary. Here in Virginia, we say if you have so many thousand registered voters, you have to have a voting machine. Other states, that number varies a little bit. But my understanding is that by and large, the electoral laws from state to state are pretty much the same. And there are a couple of federal laws that establish some things that have to do with active duty military who are, overseas or stationed somewhere away from their home and that kind of thing. So there are some federal laws that are also in effect in every state.
And that was one of the questions that we talked about before. Can people who live overseas still vote in our local elections?
There are 12 people in Northumberland County who are registered to vote here, but who live overseas. I believe they're all in Europe, but yeah, there is a process for overseas citizens to register and vote.
Well, we don't have a very large percentage.
Not a whole lot.
Obviously. So another hot topic is term limits. Let's talk about that for a minute. And why do you think we have term limits, and why do you think they're so important? And we'll start with Mr. Brand again.
You gotta have fresh ideas to keep momentum going, and hopefully to have positive outcomes. If you don't have term limits and someone keeps getting voted back in, and it's more of a popularity contest than it is doing the right thing, where do the citizens, or where does your community grow from there? It doesn't. It becomes stale. Term limits, I feel, are good. We need fresh ideas. We need fresh people.
Do the supervisors have term limits?
We run every 4 years. It's a 4-year cycle. If we choose to run in the 4 years for a second or third term, we can do that. But it is 4-year.
So you have to win that election.
You have to win that election. And I think it's good, because I use myself as an example. If I'm allowed to sit on that board for 8 years, 12 years, I feel that if I didn't have to be re-elected in 4 years, I may not do my best. I need to earn it. If I want to sit back on that board another 4 years, I feel I need to earn that position. If I run unopposed, the people still need to vote. I still need to be on a ballot. Because if I'm running unopposed, yes, you may have less people come in and vote, but you know what? It's giving you a good idea who's going to vote for you. And you need to earn it. You're there to represent the people, and I'm a firm believer that I don't want to base my decisions on being re-elected in 2 years. I've been on the board now for 2. I want to base my decisions on trying to do the right thing for the county. I want to do the most good for the greatest amount of people in the county. And, a lot of times I have to research things because I'm still fairly new on the board. But I'm willing to do that, and I do that. And I like listening to what people have to say. So therefore, like I said, the terms, I'm all for it. I just, fresh ideas, fresh people, but it also makes that person that's going to sit on that board for 8 years, 12 years, they need to earn that spot.
As far as term limits are concerned, yes, I think that it is very important. As an incumbent, been on the board for one whole year next month, October. I was appointed in last October. I finished out the term of a member who transitioned and now running again. And this time it'll be for 4 years, unless redistricting does something, throws a hammer in there, and I have to do something again after the district lines change. Hopefully it won't do anything that I have to do something major, but I could. But why term limits? Why are they important, or why do I think they're important? Because I believe you don't want to take your constituents for granted.
That's right.
And, going out, earning their vote, another 4 years, I think makes a difference.
That's right.
Austin, anything to add?
No, and of course, my position on the electoral board, we're not all that concerned about.
You're appointed, correct?
Yeah. And so, I guess I can be fired anytime.
You're appointed by the supervisors, correct?
No,
Or you're
the,
appointed by
Court?
the court.
the
Yeah.
court? Okay.
The electoral boards have 3 members, and there are 2 of one party and 2 of the other, and the governor's party is the determining factor. So when you have a Republican governor, you have 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Our governor now is a Democrat, and so we have, there are 2 of us Democrats and then 1 Republican. And the local party nominates folks. So, for example, when my term expires in another year or so, the local party chairman will send a letter to the chief judge of the circuit court and say, look, here are some folks that I nominate to replace Joe, and this is the one that we, prefer, but if the judge doesn't want to, wants to go down the list, and then then Mike McKinney will appoint one of us off that list. And the same thing, Austin was nominated by the County Republican Party.
But Joe's not going anywhere.
We have as an elected official, we have a right to run for office. But once we're elected, it's a privilege to be that elected official.
That's a good one.
And that's how I look at it. And like you said, we need to continue to earn the respect from the constituents and earn their vote. And the terms, like I said, I keep going back to it, and I support that.
On school board, do you have to declare your affiliation with the party?
No,
No. So you're
independent.
independent, but you do a supervisor or no?
No.
Okay. So that really doesn't come into play. It's representing the people in your district. That's the
Yes.
most important part.
And I mean, no defense to any Democratic Party or anyone on the Republican parties. I view being in local government as I represent the people, and I want to do my best to represent all people. I don't want to, base my decisions on a political party or anything based on religion. If I just want to make the very best decision to do the most for the greatest amount of people.
See, we have a number of elected offices. The supervisors are 5 of them, the school board is 5 of them, and the sheriff is elected, and the county treasurer is elected, the commissioner of revenue, the Commonwealth's attorney, and the clerk of the court. Those are all 4-year terms. The clerk of the court is an 8-year term, and those are non-party. Now, you will, from time to time, you may get the county Republican Party or the county Democratic Party saying, hey, this is the person we really support. But they do not show up with a D or an R or an I or whatever it is next to the name on the ballot. They are non-partisan. The House of Delegates and the state senate, and then of course governor and all that, those are partisan elections.
So
partisan candidates.
we have a couple of minutes here, and I wanted to finish up by giving you an opportunity to talk about why I should show up at the polls on November 2nd, and how important it is to you to have the right to vote here in the United States of America. So we'll start with Joe.
But one reason I'd like to see people show up at the polls is so they can go in there and see how it works. Go in, we check you to see if you're registered, and you're handed a ballot, and you get to mark that ballot, and then you can watch the results that night on TV and see what goes on, what effects you've had. So I'd just like for people to get out and participate in it. I think another reason is, as we all said here at the beginning, if you don't participate, don't be complaining about the outcome. And I'm an old soldier, and Austin is too. Between us, he and I have about 2 lifetimes in the Army. And we've both lived in a lot of countries overseas, and everybody has elections. You've got elections here and elections there, but there are elections and then there are elections. We have honest, free, and fair elections. A lot of places in the world don't have that, and if you do not get out and exercise it, there is a chance you can lose it. Do not ever assume that this country cannot develop into some kind of an authoritarian rule or a one-party dictatorship or something like that. It has happened, and it can happen here. So get out and vote, and keep the elected officials honest, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And war story, if you will. I commanded a unit in Iraq that assisted in getting the detainees who were suspected terrorists. We had them incarcerated, waiting for their judicial system to mature and adjudicate their cases. And so I had 8,000 people, men, over the age of 18 in my camp, and we conducted the elections for the first time these people had ever voted for a constitution, and the first time they've ever voted for their local election, their local representatives. And initially they were suspicious that we were somehow monitoring them and going to report back to some headquarters somewhere on how they voted and whatnot. And we set up voting booths, and they went in, and Lord have mercy, there were somewhere between 100 and 400 different people on the ballot, because they represented all of Iraq, and we had people from all of Iraq in the facility. And it was amazing. Initially, they were very suspicious, and we brought in their voting, their electoral representatives and officials from Basra down to where I was in the middle of nowhere, and they went in. They had campaigns and things like that, where the people were informed of who was running and what their platform was and things like that, and they were informed of what this new constitution of Iraq was going to say and how it would affect them. And by golly, eventually they all said, okay, this is cool, we've never done this before. Because under Mr. Saddam's regime, it's just, you're voting for Saddam, right? And everybody said, yes, 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 and everybody said, okay, good, he wins. But this time, it was the first time they've ever done it, and they had really no background in it. They had no understanding of quote unquote democracy, and they got to dip their finger in a blue pot of ink to show that they'd voted, and they were all very proud of that. In America, we've had this system for over 200 years. How it works, since the first election back there, where George Washington was elected president. And it's a fascinating system, and Joe and I, being old, we grew up in schools that taught us government and civics, and we got a taste of how it worked. But to actually participate in this thing is amazing, because the rest of the world doesn't have our system by and large. And we had a choice. When the founding fathers got the government together, we could have gone with a parliament like England does, because, okay, we understand parliaments, that's cool, it's the system we came up under. But they developed this really interesting system of representative government where everybody's vote counts. And to get into that, and I'm in the nuts and bolts now, Joe's teaching me, despite the fact, okay, I learned it. I voted overseas in the military, and did my mail-in ballot, and I've voted in the booths, and I've pulled the levers and stuck my finger on the magic machine, and made the right marks on the paper ballot. But it's a fascinating system, and it's all down here. this is, you know, people talk about grassroots. This is the grassroots. This is it. And as Joe and I we've been shot at by people who didn't like our system, and here we are, thank God. But we've seen how other systems work or don't work, and this is just an amazing system, and everybody who's eligible to vote needs to go and vote and participate in this. This is a participating representative democracy. That's what it's all about. And women, for heaven's sake, women couldn't vote till what, 1920 or whatever? And for heaven's sakes, all of a sudden that changed the system. And blacks couldn't vote or had all kinds of obstacles. And finally we got our act together. There's another word, but I'll say act. And you know, got everybody to be able to vote who's a legal citizen and representative here. And it's just amazing. Everybody's equal. And that's the way it should be. And everybody is not equal in other places. And folks need to kind of get their head around that this is a unique situation, and appreciate what we've got here and participate. End of sermon.
I'll end the way I started. It's all political. Your vote matters. Your voice matters. If there's something that you want changed, you know, a way in order to make that change is to make your voice heard. You make your voice heard by voting. In my role, and that's the only role I can talk about at this point, in my role as a school board member, if you want to make an impact on the future, you certainly have a way of doing it through education. And school board members impact the education of our future. It's all political, and your vote matters.
I look at voting as far as trying to make change, but also look at how many sacrifices have been made to give us the right to vote, the privilege to vote. We have young men and women now coming home from foreign countries that will never be the same. They are protecting our rights to vote, our right to vote to hopefully make change, to make things better. And again, it's important to vote is, you know, sitting around and talking with groups of people. No one should complain about how the world or how our country is being run if you haven't voted. So it is very important to vote. There have been a lot of sacrifices made to give us that right, that privilege. And if we don't vote, there will be no change. And if everybody had the same attitude as my vote don't count, then things would get a whole lot worse than what they are now.
Fortunately, our vote does count, and I thank you all.
And to get back to what this gentleman over here was saying about how things have changed when women couldn't vote and the African Americans couldn't vote. You know, if people didn't get out and vote to change that, where would we be today? So yes, that's good examples of how your vote does count.
Well, thank you very much. I thank our panel. I don't know if there's any questions from the audience. If there's not, it's a wrap. And I just thank you all for your time, for taking the time to talk to us about voting and why it's so important. We have an election coming up on November 2nd. Polls are open all day. They open what time, Joe?
November 2nd, polls open at 6 in the morning,
6 in the
close
morning.
at 7 at night.
Okay.
If anybody's interested, here's, I got a little piece of paper that has what some of the deadlines are and where all the polling places are and the ID that you need to bring with you. And if anybody's not registered to vote, we can register you right now.
That's right.
So there you go.
So we're set to go. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you all. Thank you for coming.